Hey, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So, of course, we're going to be starting off with the boxing fighting news. And so, if you are new around here, we start off with the boxing fight news, then we go through kind of each of the big boxing events, and then we'll move on to the MMA news, go through each of the big MMA events. So, nice little format that we got going. We'll start, like I say, with the boxing fight news. And so, Zoo will fight Spencer April 6th. That is an interesting contest. I mean, I don't think Spencer's a bad fighter at all, and it's going to be very intriguing to see where Zoo's head's at, if he's still able to fight at a high level, if he can still take punches, has his chin gone. There's going to be also a lot of pressure on him as well, like there has been in his entire career. I mean, he's worked very hard to be able to get the big fights against that of the Fondoras and, even in Murtazaliev one as well. He worked very hard to be able to get to that position, but now he's had to take this step back and go back to fighting in Australia. I mean, to be honest, he isn't having as long out as perhaps you would have maybe wanted or expected from somebody who had just been knocked out badly and before that had a really gruesome fight. It's just, them two fights being paired together is really horrible, what you can imagine for somebody's career. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Zoo can really kind of be able to get back to the heights of his career. If he can, then I got to put my hands up and just say full credit to him. But it's going to be, like I say, very difficult to see if he can do that. Zabek will fight Fuzil April 5th. Bikoli versus Ajagba is still planned for May, so it seems like even though Bikoli, of course, lost badly versus Joseph Parker, it seems like his fight versus Ajagba is still there for May. That makes sense. I mean, His Excellency is doing something that I really enjoy, which is giving opportunities to fighters who come and rescue cards and showcase that they are a true fighter and they will take risks. And Piccoli, of course, did that. He came in on very short notice, and obviously things didn't go his way, but he still deserves a chance, and he still can be a world class heavyweight. And so, he still seemingly has this chance. It seems like it's not going to be an eliminator for the IBF title anymore, which is, of course, a shame for Piccoli and the Jagba as well, to be completely honest, because you know it's kind of written him out to an extent, but still, it hopefully will still be a very good fight when it does seemingly happen. His Excellency wants the winner of Eubank Jr. versus Ben to fight Canelo. So obviously, we've had the whole huge incidents with Eubank and Ben this week with the whole press conference where Eubank, of course, slapped Ben with an egg, and then, the whole press conference as a whole was very weird with, Eubank Jr. getting involved a lot and going back and forth with Eddie Hearn and saying that he wants to sit next to Ben, and there's been a lot of things about the weight as well, and so it's just been a very interesting build up to this fight, as everybody expected. I mean, it was always going to be fiery, there was always going to be a lot of drama, controversy, and I mean, it's worked wonders because the kind of pre-ballot sales have been crazy from what it seems like 120,000, 130,000 from what I've heard, and so that's insane for a boxing event in the UK, to be completely honest. So, you know, this is crazy. But now, of course, we had the whole face off with Eubank Jr. and Ben. Eubank Jr. obviously slapped Ben with an egg. Then Eddie Hearn got involved, pushed Ben Shalom. And then, Ben's father also got involved, tried to strangle Eubank Jr. And so now they seemingly aren't even allowed to do any more face-offs, or at least, they weren't allowed to do the kind of seated face-off, which was a real shame because they're always known to be classics in big fights. I mean, there's been so many great ones over the years, and so it is a shame and that the boxing board have kind of just not allowed it. I mean, it isn't at the end of the day an egg. I mean, a lot of people have been quite vocal about how dangerous it could have been and things like that. I mean, the whole sport of boxing is dangerous, and so for Eubank Jr. to slap Ben with an egg really isn't that bad compared to what could have happened, what he could have done, and he didn't do that. And they're being, just in my opinion, a little bit dramatic with the whole situation. I mean, it's worked wonders, like I say, for the sales of it, and so surely that's what you want. But nonetheless, I mean, like I say, it seems like they're not allowed to do any more face-offs or anything like that, or at least for the moment they're not. And so, yeah, it's just a bit of a shame, to be completely honest. But like I say, it seemingly His Excellency wants to get them to fight Canelo. I mean, it was talks that Eubank Jr. was going to fight Canelo at some point, early last year, I believe, like May time last year. So there has been that bit of talks there. I mean, the winner of this could be in line, of course, to fight for a world title. So that definitely could happen, but it just we'll have to wait and see. I mean, if this fight does sell incredibly well, then I'm sure Canelo's going to be watching it and thinking he can get a big payday here. And so there definitely could be a big option. And I mean, a Canelo versus a Eubank Jr. build-up could definitely be a fun and interesting build-up now that Canelo's, out there speaking English, putting on, funny press conferences. Smither will fight Cuesta March 7th. Isley has called out Adamus. I doubt that will happen, but it's been interesting to see Isley call him out, and that's what you want from a young prospect. Sendro versus Yaman, Kademi versus Bruce, Lungu versus Hunte Smith, Rene, Berardi, McGann, Zamekesh, Aguis, White, Gaskin, Farrington, and Willings will fight March 29th. Espinoza is rumoured to fight Vasquez March 4th. I think that will be an excellent contest. I mean, Vasquez has always been in great contests, and now he's dropped down to that of the the featherweight division, and I feel like he definitely has the makings to be a champion, or at least to always be in top fights and to always make it difficult for champions. I mean, the kind of difficulty that he caused Cordina was crazy, and this was during a time where Cordina was on top of the world. I mean, he'd knocked out Ogawa, he'd beat Rakhmonov, and then the Vasquez fight came along, and he arguably, could have got a draw, could have got a win in that fight, Vasquez, and he was unfortunate not to. And so it's nice to see that he's still getting these opportunities, and Espinoza, now that he's beaten Ramirez again, he doesn't really have too many big options to fight unless he's probably either going to wait around for that of a Inoue fight to come available if it does come available for him, or perhaps he'll go for Liao at some point. But Liao seems to have some sort of fight in Japan kind of lined up with Kameda, so there kind of isn't too many huge fights, and he seemingly definitely wants to keep active, and he is still a new champion, so he's kind of had this whole thing with Ramirez, and now he's moving away from that. There's definitely needs to be a few defences to be able to build himself as a champion, and so this is going to be a great defence in my opinion. Hopefully the fight will happen, and I believe it will be on an Inoue undercard, which, like I say, could set up for an interesting contest if Espinoza does win, and then he could go on to fight Inoue, perhaps when Inoue is ready to come up into the featherweight division. And to talk about Inoue versus Picasso, that fight seems like it's in doubt, which is a shame because I mean, if it wasn't going to be Akhmadaliev, I would have been, happy with the Picasso fight, and I would have been interested to see how it goes. But it seems like that's in doubt. It seems like there will be another fight, which I'll touch upon in a moment, that most likely will be for Inoue. Majid versus Murphy, Birchall and Musa will fight April 5th. GBM Sports have made an offer for Padley versus Hughes for May, which is excellent to see. I mean, two guys who have always given their all to the sport, and they've been, given some great opportunities in their career. I mean, Hughes has been unfortunate at times at a world level. Padley has recently been at a world level and didn't look bad, really, but just, came in on such short notice, and it was against, one of the best fighters in the world in Shakur Stevenson, and so I feel like that fight was a fight that has to happen, and hopefully GBM Sports can get it over the line, because for them as a promotion, that would be a huge fight to make. His Excellency wants KSI to fight a boxer in America. He has gone from saying that he would never work with these, YouTube boxers and misfits boxers and influencer boxers, crossover boxers, whatever you want to call them. but now he's, all of a sudden had a video with KSI, and he's been slagging off Jake Paul, how Jake Paul fought Mike Tyson, and so he's saying that he wants KSI to fight a real boxer. That would be a good tough test, and hopefully we will see that happen, and I'm sure KSI probably would agree to do it because the amount of money that His Excellency will probably give him to fight. He sees that that market's there. Does that mean he's going to try to tap into it more? I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but perhaps there could be some entertaining fights with influencers who are at the top level of the misfit scene and have been talked about fighting pro boxers, and they'll get big money as a result of it. So maybe that could be a good thing, but it's just, I know it's going to piss off a lot of true boxing fans, but for me, like I say, I don't mind if he does fight an American fighter. Just like I say, seem interesting to see that he's kind of gone back upon his word to an extent. Moving on, Alvarez, Lopez, La Cruz, and Alvarez will fight April 11th. That is an Aegon Sports promotions event, and that is one of the biggest kind of events that they've ever done. I mean, they've got, what, 4 Olympians there, 4 top Cuban Olympians, and they're putting them on a show in Cuba, which is, from what I've heard, from what I've read up about it, the first Cuban boxing event since it was banned by Castro, the leader, back in 1940s, I believe, or something crazy like that. And so, yeah, that's wild to see that Aegon Promotions have been able to do that. And I don't know necessarily how they were able to do that and how they were able to, find getting through the laws, or if they were able to get rid of the law. I don't necessarily know, but yeah, that's huge for Cuba. And I mean, there's so many excellent Cuban fighters. I mean, all these Olympians have just been kind of sat about because they haven't been able to fight professionally. And now these can all fight professionally in their home country and get these opportunities, and hopefully that will push, first of all, that will push Aegon Promotions as a bigger uh, promotion, and they are actually getting more recognition now, of course, with some of the names that they have, and so it's also going to push their careers of these amazing Olympians, as they will now be able to create a name for themselves and be able to fight professionally in their home country and get given that opportunity, which, like I say, is just huge and excellent, to be honest. Boxing's participation in the 2028 Olympics is edging closer to happening, as the IOC have recognised world boxing. So basically, it seems from what I've read up, a boxing board have kind of come and accepted on boxing in the 2028 Olympics, and kind of are willing to represent them and work with them, and to be the kind of promotion to put on the fights, and the council to an extent to put on the fights. Obviously, we have like WBC, WBA, IBF. They sanction fights. The British Boxing Board, they sanction professional fights, but we need somebody to be able to sanction the Olympic fights, and it seems like the IOC have been able to find somebody to do that. I believe it might be the IOC themselves. I might be wrong, but yeah, that's huge and excellent. And I've been campaigning, you know, for a while, saying that I believe boxing has to happen in the Olympics. I mean, there's so many sports that can also be classed as dangerous and can also be, have high risks, but boxing has been in the sport for so long in the Olympics, and it was one of the original sports in the Olympics, from what I believe. And so to be able to take it out would be horrible, because it has given so many opportunities to so many great amateurs, which they never would have had otherwise, and then we would have never seen them professionally and never had the great nights in which they provided. So yeah, it's just excellent to see, and hopefully it does end up all going ahead, and it's just a great positive. Mason will fight Cabrera April 5th. Like I touched upon last week, this was kind of set to happen. Now it's actually happening. It's a great progression of fight, in my opinion, for Mason. And, if he wins this one again, then maybe he'll be in line for a final eliminator for a world title or something, along them lines. Per Benito, Palma versus Via Fuarte and Verduzco will fight April 19th. Padley has joined Matchroom Boxing. That's the only kind of problem there, means that GBM might not be able to win a bid for Padley versus Hughes, but they may, because it seems like Eddie Hearn does seem to like Izzy as if, so maybe that could happen. But Padley, like I say, is getting this recognition in which he does deserve, and a huge contract for him now. It means that he probably won't ever be going back to his electrical job again, which is, like I say, revolutionary for his career, and it's changed his life around. Lopez will fight Barboza Jr. May 2nd, now adding on to a huge card in America with Riyadh season. Of course, we've got Devin Haney versus, I've forgotten off the top of my name, Ramirez, Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero, and then, now Lopez versus Barboza Jr. And, 3 huge fights all happening on one card from what I believe is going to be a free show in Times Square. I might be wrong, but I know it's in America and it's going to be a huge event, and it seems like the Lopez fighting in Alcatraz thing might not be happening. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, huge. Great fight as well. I mean, Barboza Jr. getting quite a quick turnaround. I mean, from his January fight to May, I suppose maybe not too quick, but he's getting this opportunity as he's deserved after winning and beating Jack Catterall. He then gets moved on to actually fight for the belt. If it was Catterall beating Barboza, would he have been moved on to fight Lopez so quickly? Probably not, but at least it's great to see Lopez actually fighting a tough guy instead of just, tiptoeing around some lesser opponents. Navarrete is set to fight May 10th. There's a couple options of who he could fight. I mean, Suarez is one of them. That would be a good fight, and I believe there's a couple others as well. So hopefully we'll see him fight against an undefeated guy, and we'll see how he fares. Hearn wants Hitchens to fight Kambosos Jr. in June, which is an interesting one because it means that he's Matias, who's there waiting, who of course I'll touch upon in a minute, won this weekend, isn't going to be able to get that second opportunity to fight for the belt, even though he lost not, that badly versus Paro, and, has won twice since, and definitely could be deserving of the fight. Of course, he was talked about fighting Lopez, and that didn't happen, so, it seems like they're not really that bold about making that fight for Hitchens, because, it's going to be a risky contest, and the Kambosos Jr. one, I mean, Kambosos has to get through his opponent first, and then he has to be able to then get the option. But I just don't feel like Kambosos Jr. still isn't, deserving of a world title shot. Even if he beats Jordan, that's not a big enough win to then warrant another world title shot. But, with Matchroom having Hitchens and Kambosos Jr., they kind of can just do what they want, which is, I'm sure it'll be a good contest, but it's just not really quite, I'm sure, what the fans want. Inoue is set to fight Cardenas May 4th. This is what I'm touching upon. Again, another highly ranked contender, but I don't know, Inoue not fighting at Medaliev again. A huge shame. Everybody still wants to see it, and, hopefully one day we'll see it. But then, if he's fighting these Cardenases, if he's fighting, Picassos, could he just not move up into the featherweight division? I mean, I love Inoue, and what he's doing is amazing. He's able to steamroll through these guys and look excellent. But how long can he do that before he maybe slips up or overlooks his opponent too much? And I'm just not too sure. And hopefully, if he does get through this fight, then he can go on to fight a big name. But this fight still might not happen. But we'll have to wait and see. It seems like it probably will. At least he's being quite active with fighting. James vs Martinez, Hernandez vs Lucero, Cuba and Sheehy will fight March 22nd. Kaige vs Gonzalez and Torres vs Walters will fight March 8th. Delgado vs Elvis will fight April 5th. The WBC have ordered Bivol vs Benavides. To be honest, it seems like the rematch probably will still get made. I mean, not the rematch, the trilogy will still get made versus Bivol and Beterbiev probably before then, but the WBC are getting involved and saying that this fight could happen. Sometimes, I'm not a massive fan when the boards get involved and stop fights from happening, but to be honest, I don't mind it. I mean, if, maybe it's time to move on a little bit. I mean, I'm sure the trilogy will always be there, but if Bivol's able to fight Benavides, it's something a bit different, something a bit new for the fans. And then, if he beats Benavides, then he can go and fight Beterbiev again for a trilogy. And that's not bad at all. I don't mind that at all. It's just, bringing a bit more life into the division, not just keeping the division quite stale because, it's a great fight, Bivol Beterbiev. It always will be, but it just means that, people like Benavidez are going to be waiting around forever because they just don't have any more options, any more fights there available to them. So, it seems like he's actually going to be moving the division on a bit, which to an extent is a bit of a smart thing. So hopefully, maybe we'll see that happen next. The WBC have ordered Adamus versus Sultanov. Probably will still be Adamus versus Shiraz, in my opinion. And some sad news, Jones has passed away. He's a fighter who fought Kell Brook, Ted Cheeseman, a fighter who maybe didn't always have the best of records, but was always in good, tough fights and was always a very good, tough fighter. I believe 36-16 record or something like that. And he was young, unfortunately, when he's passed. And yeah, it's sad. I believe it was some sort of scan that went wrong. I don't necessarily know all the facts about it, and I don't necessarily know if there was much of a boxing kind of impact in his passing. But it is a big shame, and it's never nice to see somebody pass who has been in boxing, has been a great servant to the sport. Moving on now to speak about, the boxing events. We'll start by talking about Junto Nakatani versus David Cuellar. And so Kiyuchi won via unanimous decision versus Kitajima. Aiko won via unanimous decision versus Sato. Mariah won via TKO in round 2 versus Akai. Nasukawa won via unanimous decision versus Maloney. Satsumi drew versus Higer. And Nakatani won via KO in round 3 versus Cuellar to remain WBC World Bantamweight Champion. And to go through the big three main cards, big three main fights on this card, we'll start with Nasukawa beating Maloney. I got my prediction wrong for this one. I thought Maloney, perhaps might be able to rough him up more. I thought Nasukawa would be outdone by the experience of that of Maloney, but Maloney again showcasing I don't really think there's much left in his career. I don't think he has the physical strength to be able to deal with the style that he wants to put on. I think he wants to put on a physical come forward style, but I just don't think he can match the tempo and be physical enough to be able to do that. And Nasukawa was just able to land quite consistently on him. I think Nasukawa looked improved, and when Maloney was having success, I think he had a little bit of success, Maloney, but still, for the most part, I think Nasukawa was able to, evade shots well and land cleanly, consistently, and inevitably have a lot of success. And now he's put himself right in line for a title shot, and it seems like he might be going to fight Takai next. I think they did a face-off after that fight, and so maybe Nasukawa versus Takai could be next, and I think that would be an excellent contest. And so hopefully we will see that. And I mean, the great name that of Nasukawa with the following that he has, it would be a huge fight in Japan. And then Satsumi drew versus Higer. That was a real, shame, to be completely honest. I got my prediction wrong, so I don't think it would be a draw, but I thought Satsumi would win. And in my opinion, he did kind of deserve to win. I thought he definitely had the cleaner work, and I think Higer even was quite surprised that the decision went to a draw, kind of went his way to an extent. And so, Satsumi definitely, like I say, landed cleaner, landed better, was the more controlled fighter. Higer was a lot messier. Higer looked good versus Takai, and I thought he beat Takai, but just in this contest, he looked messy, and Satsumi was able to, like I say, in my prediction, have a lot better success with just a better in close work, and it led to a draw. Probably will see a rematch, but at least Satsumi kept his title because I think he definitely deserves it. And Satsumi is a great fighter, and I think he can go on to have some great fights. And it seems like these contests between Higer, he can just maybe never beat Higer. It just always leads to a draw. And then Nakatani, of course, won via that brutal knockout versus Cuellar, again just beating another opponent down. Perhaps this is something a bit different to what we've seen, just purely just beating a guy down and showing another way that he can stop a fighter. It's just excellent to see again, showing that Cuellar isn't on his level, but we kind of already all expected that, but it's just always nice to be reminded. And now hopefully again, everybody's hoping that he moves on to bigger fights. It seems like he might go on to fight Nishida in the EX next, so hopefully that will happen. And there's a big fight there again to be made. Unification is finally happening in Japan. Moving on now to speak about the Eduardo Hernandez versus Rene Giron card, which was a matchroom card out in Canada. Not really touched upon too much by Matchroom, but it seems like Matchroom are just kind of flexing their guns to just showcase that they can have a little card to an extent out in Canada and still not even have to do too much, promote it too much, and it's still, just a big event there. And Eduardo Hernandez is a big name, and to just be able to randomly throw him on a card in Canada, it's, like I say, just them flexing to an extent that they can do that. So going through the card, Hughes won via TKO in round 3 versus Heredia. Reeves won via TKO in round 1 versus Zarbotta. Fongio won via unanimous decision versus Rejeb. Mrzenovic won via unanimous decision versus Beluski. Pomelu won via TKO in round 6 versus McIntosh. Barriere won via stoppage in round 6 versus Resendez. And Hernandez won via unanimous decision versus Giron. Hernandez, that was a comfortable kind of beat-down performance, dominating Giron, really showcasing he was levels above. I believe Hernandez versus like a Ray Ford would be an excellent fight to be made, but I also think him versus Nunes will be a huge fight to be made. So hopefully he gets another big fight soon. I mean, realistically, he isn't too far off deserving another world title shot because obviously he had the fight versus Oshaki Foster, and that was a very close fight that he was winning, and so it really won't surprise me if he does get a world title shot soon because I do think he deserves it, and I feel like that's why Matchroom are kind of sticking around with him because they do believe that he probably will get a world title shot soon. And so far so good for him, beating down another contender, showcasing he is levels above, like I said, and a good name in the sport now. Moving on now to speak about Lewis Crocker versus Paddy Donovan, the other big matchroom show this weekend, which ended, of course, in huge controversy, which I'll touch upon in a moment. But out in Ireland showcasing their crowd, showcasing the fan base that they have, always a great crowd. Boxing needs to be going there more consistently, and I believe it will be with the likes of Paddy Donovan and Lewis Crocker there, and then other names as well coming through as well, and so boxing definitely has that huge market out in Ireland, and it really needs to be tapped into as much as possible. So to go through the card, O'Neill won via points versus Wacko, Bowen won via points versus Cachero, Farrell won via points versus Hughes, Ward won via TKO in round 3 versus McCarthy, Turhan won via TKO in round 1 versus Brown, Walker won by majority decision versus Woodstock, Richards won via KO in round 8 versus McCrory, and Crocker won via disqualification in round 8 versus Donovan. And to go through some of the bigger moments of the card, I mean, Turhan to be able to win via that first round stoppage was a big shock, to be completely honest. I mean, she looked like she was perhaps throwing a little bit messy and just landed by luck a big, huge shot, but Brown was looking good, and she beat Getters then well out in Australia on that uptight undercard. So to her to be able to just get beaten down like that in Ireland was a big surprise, to be completely honest. You don't normally see them big overhands land and cause that much damage in the women's game, but that was just excellent to see. Ward beating up McCarthy showcased that McCarthy definitely isn't really able to fight at a high level anymore. I thought he retired, to be completely honest, but he's just not able to fight at a high level anymore, and he's struggling against guys like Ward. Ward's not a bad fighter, but there's definitely things that McCarthy, can't do as well as what he may be used to have been able to do. Richards, perhaps could have gone down that same route as McCarthy and really be struggling after, of course, his loss versus Hutchinson. It was quite surprising to see him on this card, and it was a bit of an interesting fight. But McCrory, didn't really seem like he wanted to be there too much, to be completely honest. But Richards capitalised upon that, won via KO. Again, that's going to just help him, benefit him, boost his confidence back up, maybe give himself that bit more of a belief that he can win and get back to it again. And there's definitely big fights around in the division, in the light heavyweight division for him in the domestic kind of scene. And so maybe a him versus a Lyndon Arthur could be a great fight, even if Lyndon Arthur does lose versus a Anthony Yard. If he doesn't retire, then that could be an excellent fight. So maybe we will see that in the coming future, and I won't be against seeing that at all, to be completely honest. And then, of course, that whole Crocker Donovan controversy. I mean, technically, I got my prediction right. I mean, I thought that Crocker would be able to win. I thought he would be able to, come down and punish Donovan when Donovan was just kind of backing up on the ropes. But Donovan was moving well. Crocker wasn't putting on the same kind of level of pressure. He was really looking limited in his shot selection, was looking very messy at times, and Donovan could see and could predict shots very easily because of just how wide and sloppy Crocker was looking quite often. But Donovan, I mean, it was quite a messy fight in general at times. I mean, they were both being quite dirty. I mean, Crocker coming in with his head, Donovan also coming in with his head, hitting him with an elbow at one point as well. It wasn't the cleanest of fights, and I suppose, we never really thought it would be, but Donovan landing that shot after the bell, the ref really should have done more to stop the fighters from being able to punch each other, because that never would have happened otherwise. And the ref's job is typically, whenever you see them fight, as soon as the bell goes, he'll jump in between the two of them and then stop them from throwing. And when you're so locked in, so focused, sometimes as a fighter you might not hear the bell going. And, it wasn't exactly like it was crazily long after the bell, and Donovan's combination was just kind of finishing. Crocker was very badly hurt. I feel like perhaps his corner probably would have pulled him out at the end of that round anyway. So it's very, very unfortunate. I mean, Crocker's eye was completely beaten up. Donovan was outboxing him for the most part and was, able to have success even if the fight was quite dirty and perhaps he was getting warned and things like that, but still, I mean, that was very unfortunate, and you could tell how upsetting it was for Donovan. I mean, there's been times where we've seen stuff like that happen, and then it's gone on to be scored by the judges and things like that. It's not just given a straight disqualification. But Crocker, putting his hands up and celebrating was him rubbing it into Donovan, to be completely honest. I mean, Donovan, of course, looked devastated, and you would do because of how big of a fight this was for his career and the fact that he was clearly winning. Yeah, it was a big shame. Hopefully we will see the rematch, but at the same time, I think deep down Donovan knows that unless the IBF really do get involved and forced the rematch to happen, it just won't happen. That's what Eddie Hearn wants to happen. He wants Donovan to be able to force this rematch, but I just not sure if the IBF are going to really get involved with it that much, and so Crocker might just wait for his forced opportunity to fight for, like I've kind of touched upon in my prediction, perhaps a vacant belt, because the winner of any Ennis versus Stanionis may move up to super welterweight if Ennis does beat Stanionis, and then the belt might become vacant. So, Crocker might just wait around and sit around for that, and I don't really believe that Crocker, from that performance, is a world level fighter really at all. I think Donovan still has improving to do as well, but I do think the rematch does, of course, make clear sense, and hopefully it will happen. But like I say, it would just be Crocker really kind of probably not wanting that fight to happen, but maybe to an extent that could build a bigger fight down the line, but hopefully it will happen next, in my opinion. Moving on to speak about Subriel Matias, him fighting Gabriel Valenzuela. Of course, Subriel Matias was talked about, like I've touched upon, fighting Teofimo Lopez. Obviously, that fell through, so he then had Gabriel Valenzuela as a backup, and Matias won by a TKO in round 8 versus Valenzuela. And so, for this fight, you kind of would imagine that Matias would have wanted to put on a brutal performance because of the fact that he was meant to be fighting Teofimo Lopez. It showcases that he's still not far off, these big fights, and he still can be linked and talked about fighting these big guys, and he just wants to put on a statement performance to be able to win and showcase that he can still fight around, high level opposition, even though Valenzuela looked quite poor, looked quite frail for the most part, and Matias also didn't look amazing. I mean, his defense is still very poor. Any kind of high guard is gone, and he's just consistently taking shots. And I think if he faces anybody with any power, then he's going to really struggle. And he also can still get outboxed at the same time as well. So, something like a Hitchens, even though I don't know if Eddie Hearn really wants to fight, like I touched upon, I still think he could really outbox Matias, to be completely honest. And Matias is good there coming forwards and putting it on physically, and he can mentally break you down like I feel like he did versus Valenzuela. But if you get the right game plan, as Paro showcased, you can really make Matias look quite poor. And Matias, like I say, his defense is very poor. And so, a TKO win again, showcasing his power again and his coming forwards, just ability. But again, like I say, it's just not the best of performances, in my opinion, from Matias. And I feel like Matias isn't going to be able to become a world champion again. Maybe he will if he gets the right opponent, but for the most part, I think it's going to be difficult for him. Moving on now to speak about the biggest card of the week, being that of Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach. Of course, as a huge kind of incident in it, which I'll touch upon at the end, and the results were huge. But we'll go through the card. Davis won via TKO in round 1 versus Johnson. Whitmere won via unanimous decision versus Munoz. Flemings Jr. won via unanimous decision versus Dervis. Cangelosi won via unanimous decision versus Tennant. Gonzalez won via split decision versus Hurd. Tellez won via unanimous decision versus Williams. Russell won via unanimous decision versus Valenzuela to become WBA World Super Lightweight World Champion. Puello won via split decision versus Martin to remain WBC World Super Lightweight Champion. And Davis drew versus Roach. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying going through the card, I mean, speaking about Jarrett Hurd, of course he lost versus Gonzalez. I mean, Gonzalez isn't a bad fighter at all, and Hurd still made it very difficult with that being of a split decision contest. And Hurd's now had back-to-back fights against not bad world level opposition in, of course, Gonzalez and Rosario as well. But I feel like there is probably a time and a place for Hurd to retire, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's after this one because yes, he had a close split decision and he probably still has a bit of life left in him, but at the same time, what have you got left to do in the sport, to be completely honest? And that's what I feel like Hurt has to ask himself. Tellez, winning by decision versus Williams, he showcased that again, another thing with Williams being a former champion, he just can't fight at the same level anymore. I mean, Tellez looked more convincing, of course, and so, Tellez looked good. He looks like he's got the capabilities to be a good prospect, and, beating former world champions already is no easy feat, and hopefully he'll probably get moved quickly as a great, upcoming fighter. And then moving on to speak about the world title fights, Russell, I got my prediction, right to an extent. I mean, I said that Russell would be able to stop Valenzuela quite late on. I believe I said round 10, but he looked good and was hurting Valenzuela. I think Valenzuela, his chin has improved, but I felt like Valenzuela was trying to change up his game plan, show a more aggressive performance. I think it's so difficult for a fighter to just really kind of bring on the defensive style if you're not naturally so defensive, and he brought on that style to beat Pitbull Cruz, but I just be able to keep that style, it's just not naturally in you, and Valenzuela is that bit more of an aggressive fighter, and he was able to land big power shots at times where Russell, was getting too confident and staying in range too long, but when Russell's confidence grew, it also made him better at the same time. I feel like the Puello fight did knock him down a little bit, but I believed that he would be, of course, bigger than that of Cruz. Valenzuela wouldn't be able to handle him as well. I did like the shoe shine type shots, in which I was talking about in my prediction, which I liked, the fast combinations, and then the power really came into it into the later rounds, which is typically where he's able to, for the most part, get to these big stoppages because he carries his power late into the fight. And he of course he wasn't able to get a stoppage, but now he's a world champion, and this belt's kind of getting tossed about all over the place at the moment. But now Russell has it. Will he be able to keep it? We'll have to wait and see. Will he get the rematch versus Puello now? Maybe we'll have to wait and see. But that is a huge feat for him in his career. Obviously, he isn't able to be the only champion who has a full, knockout win ratio, but still an excellent victory against Valenzuela. And then Puello beating Martin by split decision. It was a very close fight. Martin, again, maybe arguably deserved to win. I got my prediction technically right, but I believe I said Puello would stop Martin. Martin needs to get more credit as a fighter. He's been very unfortunate with all the decisions not going his way. And again, this is another unfortunate decision not going his way. And, it's cost him a world title again. And is he going to get a nod at any point? I'm not entirely sure. I feel like he was, landing the more accurate work. I feel like they're both, were able to stand in the pocket well and have success. Puello was being the less accurate out of the two, and Martin just maybe wasn't throwing quite as much. It's just very minor, the only reasons as to why he would have lost. And again, it's unfortunate he's going to have to be able to go back and probably rebuild himself again before he gets an opportunity. I doubt he'll get a rematch, but maybe he will. But yeah, two close fights for Borralho being a interim champion and now a world champion. I'm sure that wasn't the big world title win that he wanted to cement himself as a true world champion. And then Davis drawing versus Roach. I mean, Roach is my fighter of the week. The fact that he was able to defy the odds and draw versus Davis, Gervonta Davis, one of the faces of boxing, is huge. Roach was having a lot of success, was able to quite often push back Davis and capitalise and just throw Davis off his momentum and his rhythm and just not let him get in the same flow. And, you know, he wasn't like a Frank Martin like I thought he would be, where he was just instantly on the back foot and seemingly quite scared. He had such a great defence, and I felt like Gervonta Davis just struggled to be able to really find the openings. I felt like he was definitely overlooking Roach, and that's just something maybe that that Davis hadn't had to deal with too much. Just a really good defensive-minded fighter who just knew how to take the power and knew when to capitalise and had his timing down to a T. And it showcased that Roach is a world champion level. And the fact that Davis just took a knee in the middle of the round 9 because of something to do with his hair, he said. I don't think he was hurt as to why he took a knee, but it just showed that I don't think his head's really that in it or that bothered to an extent. He just casually just took a knee for no reason and then just went to try and have a chat with the guy behind and just outside the ring. It was so stupid, and that probably made it a draw, even though it definitely could have been still a draw either way. But yeah, it was just stupid. And Davis, why did he do that? I don't know, but it seemed like he got fortunate to even get a draw, maybe to an extent. It was still a close fight. David had success with the bigger shots in the earlier rounds, but yeah, for the most part, Roach was good and was looking good. And then when Davis did take the knee afterwards, he had a couple good rounds then. But still, Roach, my fighter of the week, a shocking performance to be able to get a draw versus Gervonta Davis. Will he get a rematch now? We'll have to wait and see. Maybe, maybe not. But still, he showcases that he can still fight at the lightweight division, and he's not too weak to be able to fight there either. And so we'll now move on to speak about Ricardo Malajika versus Jackson and Chauke for the IBO World Flyweight title. Malajika won via KO in round 2 versus Chauke to become that world champion. And it was a great performance from Malajika. I got my prediction wrong. I thought Chauke would be able to have more success. I thought he looked very good versus Kademi, but unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to have that level of success, and he did get beaten up, and he did, it was difficult to watch because Chauke was trying to come forwards and was trying to get in close, but he just got hurt every single time by Malajika, and it showcased that he wasn't on the same level. So clearly, he just had a very good night when he did fight Kademi. Moving on to speak about Ryan Garner versus Salvador Jimenez. Isaacs won via points versus Gregores. Franken won via points versus Fourier. Itorma won via TKO in round 3 versus Lud. Weizak. Butler won via points versus Marias. Turner won via TKO in round 1 versus Antin. Dillon won via split decision versus Rueg. Edmondson won via unanimous decision versus Kajara, will remain Commonwealth Light Heavyweight Champion, and Garner won via unanimous decision versus Jimenez to become EBU European and WBC International Super Featherweight Champion. I was a big fan of what Queensberry did, putting on a big show out in Bournemouth, even though it wasn't, Southampton, where Garner is known from, and, everything like that. It wasn't far away, and so Bournemouth definitely have a big boxing fan base in general, and in Southampton, being able to be represented by a boxer in Ryan Garner, they're getting really behind their fighter, and I love to see that, and it showcases that he does have a big fan base. He's not the biggest of personalities, so it's quite surprising, but still, that's what I like to see. I don't just want all of Queensberry's shows to just be at your call on these Friday night shows or Saturday night shows. I want them to be, spread about all over the country and to be able to showcase the skills of all the fighters and showcase that the fan bases will come out to the hometowns, home cities, or nearby that of these fighters that they have in their stable, even if they aren't the biggest of names, because they can create bigger names as a result of that. And Ryan Garner definitely is an excellent fighter and has the capabilities to be able to move on well. he looked good versus Hernandez and had a lot of success. And I feel like he's, of course, now got this EBU title that can now progress him on to even bigger and better things. So hopefully he does get that. And it was interesting, of course, to see that Joe Joyce wasn't on the card. They didn't really touch upon that too much in the build-up, but it's definitely because the Dillian White fight, they just don't want to risk it. And there's no surprise at all there, to be completely honest, especially upon Joe Joyce's recent performances. Moving on to speak about the Liam Wilson versus Youssef Dib, the last boxing event that we touched upon, that rematch. Davey won by TKO in round 4 versus Manuel. Rustam won by KO in round 1 versus Nafiz. Puo Hartua won via TKO in round 2 versus Wright. Larfield won by unanimous decision versus Lee. Masson won by unanimous decision versus Namdi. Harrison won by unanimous decision versus Costello to remain Australian Super Flyweight Champion. Bowen won by unanimous decision versus Shegaliev. Manu won via TKO in round 3 versus Tate to become IBF Pan Pacific Super Lightweight Champion. And Wilson won by unanimous decision versus Dib. He managed to win again, back-to-back defeats over Dib. There was controversies about a body shot, and, if it was true or not, and it turned into a bit of a back and forth, and Dib kind of like giving it back and forth with Wilson. It was fiery. Wilson won by unanimous decision in the end. Now that's the rematch done, and will they make another one as a result of the controversy? Maybe, but Liam Wilson's had some great moments in his career. The fact he can still keep winning, even if it is controversial, showcases maybe he can still get back to a high level in the division. We'll have to wait and see. He's definitely doing good things out in Australia, but there's definitely a bridge in skill level to be able to get to a world level, as shown. But now moving on to speak about the MMA fight news. So Jones has rejoined the UFC. Hooker versus Gaethje is off. Hooker having an injury. Gaethje then kind of just put out a call out to say whoever wants to fight him can get the opportunity. But then Moicano stepped forward, Fiziev stepped forward. Various different guys stepped forward. Poirier, I think, offered it. Multiple different guys. Sarukian, I think, got offered it. Lots of different guys, but he did eventually, agree with a fight to fight Fiziev again in the rematch. I think that's going to make for a great fight. It was interesting to see, that Sarukian was so up against Hooker and everything like that, going back, kind of just slagging him off a lot. And so, there's definitely a lot of interesting fights in the lightweight division, and there's a lot of controversies and rivalries that I didn't even really know were a thing. And so, now at least we still get to see Gaethje fight Fiziev. I think Hooker vs Gaethje is still going to be a great fight if Gaethje can beat Fiziev in the rematch. But, again, Gaethje is always going to be an entertaining fight, so I have no doubt that it will be again, and that will be coming soon. Andrade will fight Jazu Darvicius May 10th. Aldo will fight Zahabi May 10th. Aldo still trying to get about fighting, I respect it. Mitchell will fight Silva April 12th. Silva called out Mitchell, and now that fight's going to happen. I mean, I'm sure everybody's going to be rooting for Silva, as they should be realistically, and Mitchell's going to really have to just kind of not care, I suppose, to an extent, but it's going to be a weird build-up, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the crowd's like when they get in there. But Silva has the potential to be able to beat a guy that nobody's really liking, and to be able to really create a big statement victory in his career, is getting this big opportunity, and it's showcasing if you do get on the mic and call people out and you are entertaining, the UFC will deliver them fights for you, which is excellent. Hill versus Roundtree, Smith versus Mingyang, Chikazi versus Sanama, Pereira versus Magmedov, Alaskarov versus Miniz. They will fight April 26th. I touched upon a couple of them fights, but Hill versus Roundtree Jr. Is an excellent fight in my opinion. I think Hill, obviously coming off the defeat versus Prohaska, still a former champion, didn't look awful in that fight, had success. I would like him to try come in a little bit better in the weight, but Roundtree Jr. coming off the fight versus Alex Pereira, of course, didn't look bad at all. He hurt Pereira at a time and really showcased a lot of heart. I think it's an excellent fight. Obviously, he did get beaten up badly in the end, but still made it a very tough, unexpected contest for Alex Pereira. And I think, yeah, it's a great contest, and Roundtree Jr. still has that capabilities to be able to really get in and amongst the division and maybe get a rematch with Pereira at some point if he can win this one and then maybe one more. But the UFC rewarding a guy who's really come and had a tough fight, and that's what I love to see. And then, I've touched upon the Smith versus Min Yang fight. Smith's retirement fight versus Min Yang is going to be terrifying. Chikazu Onam was a good fight. Pereira Magomedov's a good fight. And so, yeah, it's a great card, in my opinion, for a UFC fight night. Chalmers will fight Simmons April 5th. Nickel is set to fight Derrida May 3rd. I think that's a great underrated fight, to be completely honest. And if that does happen, hopefully it will. Ferguson is set to fight Danis. Perhaps it's the best chance of Ferguson actually being able to get a win. That being, of course, in the GFL. Danis still fighting KSI first, though. So, yeah, it's just weird. Vera will fight Bautista May 3rd. Moving on now to speak about the Borralho versus Brendan Allen, the Karate Combat card, where Despaigne won via KO Randall versus Souza, and Borralho won via decision versus Allen. Despaigne yet again getting a huge knockout victory in the first round, showcasing that, his grappling was poor in the UFC and his wrestling was poor, but he still had the capabilities to be able to strike, and he can hurt these guys, which of course aren't really the highest of levels, but Karate Combat is definitely getting some good names and definitely getting some good attention, and I'm here for it. I like it. It's entertaining, and there's some big moments in it seemingly every other week at the moment. And then, Borralho fighting Allen, Allen losing to Hernandez, it kind of meant that this fight would never happen, but the fact it's happening in Karate Combat, I'm not against it at all, and these UFC guys are just allowed to go and fight on this other promotion, which is, nice to see, and it's showcasing fights in which we never would have seen happen, and Borralho is still looking good and getting that clear unanimous decision victory. Moving on now to speak about the UFC Fight Night of the week, being Manuel Kape versus Asu Almabayev. Of course, it was meant to be Brandon Royval. Hopefully that still will happen, but still, nonetheless, that fight was still a good fight to be made, and it was nice to see that the card still went ahead. So Temerov won via unanimous decision versus Johnson. Aldrich won via unanimous decision versus Lee. Silva won via split decision versus Almeida. Mariscal won via unanimous decision versus Ramos. Pinto won via KO in round 2 versus Lane. Patterson won by KO in round 1 versus Barlow. Amil won by split decision versus Gomez. Hak Palast won by split decision versus Ribovics. Brundage won by KO in round 1 versus Marquez. And Kape won by KO in round 3 versus Almabayev. Of course, the Pinto knockout was a huge knockout, a mammoth knockout. There were some good ones on this card, but that was a huge one. And that was terrifying, to be completely honest. A huge guy like that going down was crazy. But then, of course, Kape winning via that KO. He looked very good for the most part. I mean, he had his tempo down to a T. He made it very difficult for Almabayev. Almabayev was sprinting away for the most part from Kape, and Kape was punishing him, but the Eyepokes yet again causing the controversy in the UFC. That's 2 weeks in a row now where Eyepokes have ended up resulting in a victory. It seemingly is the way to be able to get a win in 2025, which is, not a nice thing to be able to have as a kind of reputation at the moment. But, still Kape was winning clearly. It's a shame for Mabayev because, it's now going to class as a knockout loss on his record, and he still could have gone through the rounds if he didn't get poked in the eye and the ref just didn't care, didn't even really acknowledge it, didn't give him a timeout at all, even though he should have. Yeah, it's a shame, but Cape, like I say, was still winning and winning well. Like I've touched upon, I still want to see the Brandon Royval fight. I think that's going to be an excellent fight, if not a Kai Kara France, but it seems like Kara France might be fighting for the title soon. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like video if you did need like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.